Section 42 of Counsels and Maxims is Schopenhauer's advice about secrecy and silence. Here's what he says. You should regard all your private affairs as secrets, and in respect of them, treat your acquaintances, even though you are on good terms with them, as perfect strangers, letting them know nothing more than they can see for themselves. For in course of time, and under altered circumstances, you may find it a disadvantage that they know even the most harmless things about you. So, this first paragraph, advice to not over disclose even the most innocuous details about yourself. He says not to friends, but to acquaintances, to people you know casually, that you know mildly. You may find it in the future, especially under, he says, altered circumstances, when they have an incentive to try to hurt you, that even the smallest detail about the town you were born in or the place you went on vacation 2 years ago may turn out to be something that may be used against you. So, recommending here secrecy and silence in regard to personal details in the realm of speech with mere acquaintances. This is being written, of course, centuries before the internet, but one can see the applicability of that kind of advice today. He goes on. And as a general rule, it is more advisable to show your intelligence by saying nothing than by speaking out, for silence is a matter of prudence, whilst speech has something in it of vanity. The opportunities for displaying the one or the other quality occur equally often, but the fleeting satisfaction afforded by speech is often preferred to the permanent advantage secured by silence. So, once again, silence preferable to speech. If opportunities occur equally often, we ought to think of speaking as bearing short-term results and benefits, and silence securing a permanent advantage. I can say from my own experience, I've found many more occasions to regret speaking out than I have found occasions to regret being silent, but of course your mileage may vary. Schopenhauer goes on. The feeling of relief which lively people experience in speaking aloud when no one is listening should not be indulged, lest it grow into a habit. For in this way thought establishes such very friendly terms with speech that conversation is apt to become a process of thinking aloud. Prudence exacts that a wide gulf should be fixed between what we think and what we say. Recommending here to avoid getting into the habit, appropriate to lively people, we might say extroverts, of speaking aloud to yourself when no one is around. This brings your thought and your speech in too much of a habitual association, so that you may begin thinking out loud and revealing things you ought to conceal, even in casual conversation. This is to be avoided. The law of prudence is that what we think and what we say should be kept far apart and connected only deliberately by us. Schopenhauer goes on. At times we fancy that people are utterly unable to believe in the truth of some statement affecting us personally, whereas it never occurs to them to doubt it. But if we give them the slightest opportunity of doubting it, they find it absolutely impossible to believe it any more. The grammar of that sentence is a little bit complex, so I want to pause over it before going on to the rest of the paragraph. At times we imagine that people don't believe something true that we've told them out of our own experience, but in reality, they never even thought of doubting it. So here's a mismatch between we've said something true, we expect that people don't believe it, we find it impossible that they should believe it, and yet they do. It's never occurred to them to doubt it. Okay, so there's a one circumstance. And the other, if we give them the opportunity of doubting it, if we raise in their minds the possibility that it might be false, suddenly they can't believe it at all. They go from completely accepting it with no thought of doubt to completely doubting it with no possibility of being able to believe it at all. It's merely the directing their minds to the possibility that it could be doubted that seems to make all the difference. It's a bit like perhaps when you do some small injury to your hand and it doesn't hurt until you look at it, and then suddenly seeing it, it pains you tremendously. Some people's belief and doubt seems to be just that way. So he goes on in the same vein. We often betray ourselves into revealing something simply because we suppose that other people cannot help noticing it. Just as a man will throw himself down from a great height because he loses his head. In other words, because he fancies that he cannot retain a firm footing any longer, the torment of his position is so great that he thinks it better to put an end to it at once. This is the kind of insanity which is called acrophobia, fear of heights. Thinking here of the kind of reaction, sort of mad reaction to vertigo, where one looks down, being on a plank that's no wider than it needs to be. Pascal has an image like this. I might look down and see that I'm safe, but feel that I am unsafe because of the perception of the height and the narrowness of the ledge upon which I stand. Well, some people will simply throw themselves to their death rather than tolerate this kind of mismatch between what they perceive and what is the true reality. This sometimes happens in the realm of truth-telling and secret-keeping. We often betray ourselves into revealing something because we cannot imagine that people don't notice it. So we ourselves call attention to it, causing them to notice it for the first time. So a bit of advice, again, of some practical import, avoiding a kind of acrophobia of credulity. Schopenhauer goes on. But it should not be forgotten how clever people are in regard to affairs that do not concern them, even though they show no particular sign of acuteness in other matters. In other words, people are nosy. This is a kind of algebra in which people are very proficient. Give them a single fact to go upon, and they will solve the most complicated problems. So if you wish to relate some event that happened long ago, without mentioning any names, or otherwise indicating the persons to whom you refer, you should be very careful not to introduce into your narrative anything which might point, however distantly, to some definite fact, whether it is a particular locality, or a date, or the name of someone who was only to a small extent implicated, or anything else that was even remotely connected with the event. For that at once gives people something positive to go upon, and by the aid of their talent for this sort of algebra, they will discover all the rest. Their curiosity in these matters becomes a kind of enthusiasm. Their will spurs on their intellect and drives it forward to the attainment of the most remote results. For however unsusceptible and indifferent people may be to general and universal truths, they are very ardent in the matter of particular details. A long paragraph reminding us that people are nosy, but they're nosiest not about general truths or universal truths or philosophical truths. They want to know the specific details of who did what when. So if you wish to tell somebody a story about something far in the past or something remote, if you include any details of an identifiable person, they will grab that to go upon and eventually try to discover the whole truth. And this seems to be an insight that is an observation that is even more magnified in the area of the internet, when the whole Reddit "he will not divide us" flag affair of some years ago, or really just anything that happens when you find a group of people on the internet get determined and can identify a person's exact location from a flagpole or a restaurant that was in the background of a particular photo that they posted. We know to be cautious about this, and Schopenhauer seems to be giving us a kind of 19th century version of this. If you give people even the tiniest detail to go upon, that they're off like a bloodhound. Okay, so however indifferent they are to general truths, they very much want to know the truth about, especially embarrassing or troublesome facts about the specific details of those things. So Schopenhauer goes on. In keeping with what I have said, it will be found that all those who profess to give instruction in the wisdom of life are specially urgent in commending the practice of silence, and assign manifold reasons why it should be observed. So it is not necessary for me to enlarge upon the subject any further. However, I may just add one or two little-known Arabian proverbs which occur to me as peculiarly appropriate. Do not tell a friend anything that you would conceal from an enemy. A secret is in my custody if I keep it, but should it escape me, it is I who am the prisoner. And the tree of silence bears the fruit of peace. That's the end of section 42, which is Schopenhauer's advice and some observations about the social world and the importance of secrecy and especially of silence for the prudent person. And those three great Arabian proverbs, I especially like the last one, the tree of silence bears the fruit of peace. We should become accustomed to keeping our thoughts and our words separate and maintaining a certain kind of internal discipline in that regard. So that is section 42 of Schopenhauer's Counsels and Maxims. We'll talk about section 43 in the next video. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.